It's time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Italy is looking at an early election after the country's Prime Minister Mario Draghi stepped down last week. His resignation came despite him having survived his coalition government's confidence vote. With major members of the coalition abstaining from voting, the Prime Minister said he won't govern without 100% support from his partners who, due to the cost of living crisis in the country, failed to garner support from key parties. Italy's parliament has now been dissolved ahead of early elections slated for September 25th, with the PM staying on as a caretaker leader until that point. Invited to the position of PM as a neutral and non-partisan force by the Italian president last year and a key figure in the European Union's economic leadership as well as its solidarity against Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Draghi's departure leaves question marks not only for the future of Italian politics but also for the rest of the EU. We discussed the prospects ahead with Dr. Jun-seong, visiting professor at Yonsei University's Graduate School of International Studies. Very warm welcome to you, Professor An. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. And well, my first question, Professor, Mr. Draghi, he formed a coalition government last year, but and he managed to do so, bringing together various different factions in Italian politics and getting them to really form this coalition force that governed the country for a year. But what led to the breaking point? What led to this breakdown in recent weeks that we've seen over the PM's cost of living measures?
Yes, well, we need to talk about what happened last year. So we have to go back, rewind our clock to the last year, what happened in Italy. And well, during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis, the peak of the pandemic crisis, the former Prime Minister of Italy offered his resignation due to his cabinet's failure to cope with the pandemic situation. So Mario Draghi, and also known as the Super Mario, right? So the former president of the European Central Bank, was supported by the Italian political party to oversee effective implementation of economic stimulus in Italy, right? However, the Five Star Movement, one of the major party in Italy, right, opposed recently and a new decree concerning the economic stimulus to offset energy crisis. The big picture is that last year, because of the pandemic situation, the Italian political party got together and kind of agreed to support the Mario Draghi for the prime minister. But now the things, pandemic is kind of it's going okay, right? So it's getting better in Italy's situation. What happened was that they become the Russian factor. So because of the Ukraine war, and there was that concerning about the cost of living issues, and then there's about the economic, to offset the energy crisis. So it's more now is that the political party and the public deal with the more concern about economic crisis in Italy. So the political climate have been changed, and I think that's things happens in Italy right now.
And of course, coalitions and all these factions in Italian politics, they're nothing new. But Draghi was not elected to parliament. He was, as you said, invited to form a government in February last year by President Sergio Mattarella. And well, how significant was Draghi's non-partisan stance in Italian politics?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question, because I was wondering as well, too, right? Because that I think there's a pro and cons. He's independent, right? He's independent, basically. So what happened was that the pros for being independent, right, prime minister, is that he can be neutral, so that he can basically he appointed he forms the cabinet mostly composed of the numerous party from the Italian politics, right? So it's become he can select many people who from different background, political, spectrums, right? So I think it's good for him to select the best, running or best, combination for this cabinet. Or the other side is that the downside for the being independent is that it's hard to maintain the support from the political parties. Politics change. That happened was just like what happened in Italy. So it's how to maintain the stable support from the political party. So, for example, as we talk about the Five Star Movement, actually support him last year as to become a prime minister. But now they changing not changing, but they have to disagree on many issues, especially on the the Ukraine issue, something related to the crisis, energy crisis. They have disagreement, so that's why he ended up resigning as the prime minister.
And as you said, he was largely appointed because of his experience, his very highly seasoned experience in handling economic affairs. And Italy's inflation rate, it hit 8% in June, which was its highest level since 1986. And well, failing to deliver on a very tight schedule of promised reforms from Rome's side, that could jeopardize the country's ability to receive 200 billion euros from the EU's recovery fund. So would you say that the PM's departure is worrying for the country's economy?
Yeah, yes, I agree. I mean, because that just looking at one a single fact that before they become the prime minister of Italy, he was served as the president of European Central Bank for I think it's over about 8 years. So, and then he was and also he had a quite experience at the European Union, right? So as the economic leader, so he had a very strong background. He's technicians, right? Basically, he was a technocratic, and so he knew what to do, and he know the very he's a well-seasoned banker, also economist, right? So he know what to do on the economic crisis here. However, the concern is that but 2 points about he's like pro-EU and anti-Russia in his political stance, right? However, because of his departure I think that's a very, very bad sign for the European Union and other members of European Unions, because that Italy might change the direction. Depends on what happens, who's going to be next prime minister in Italy, and most likely, according to the recent poll, right, it's more like someone who from the right-wing side will be the most likely become the next prime minister in Italy. That would change the foreign relations of Italy also, especially for the EU, other EU countries, right? That's really concerning because they need to get the support from the country, support from the Italian government in many issues, especially on the war against Russia, Ukraine war, right? Basically, so that's very concerning. Not only economic perspective, in terms of the EU perspective, it's a big loss for the EU, and I think it's a really big challenge for the Italian politics, I think, in the future.
Right, and during the last parliamentary elections, Professor, Five Star was the largest party in Italy's parliament when the elections were last held in 2018. And well, what do you expect to see this year? Do you think it's going to basically be the end of centre-left Italian politics?
Well, that was a tough call, right? Well, we'll have to see what happens. But it seems like, according to the recent poll, it seems like more like the right side will be take control most likely and control the parliament in Italy, right? But however, you have to see what happens. So especially, I think that recently the news covers on the president of the Brothers of Italy, one of the biggest political party, which it seems like they will controlling in the next election, right? So what happened was that there was also the international news coverage about is it going to be our first female prime minister in Italy, in the history of Italy, right? So we'll have to see what happened, and also that many experts concerned about the political parties, and they're more really left, they're right wing, basically. I'm sorry, they're the right wing. So what happened was that they were concerned about who's going to be the next prime minister, also how we're going to change the current position about the many issues, international issues, yeah.
Right, exactly, and you've mentioned this before, the question of European unity with Draghi's departure. So once he leaves office and say a right-wing party or right-wing parties form a coalition and take power, then what would that really mean for the European Union as a whole?
Yeah, once again, I think Draghi's departure, it's really a big challenge in the loss actually from the EU perspective, because that he really believe in the EU, right? So because he will. Not only his technical background, also the professional background. He used to work with the EU right side, and he was the really economist, and then really so a lot of work with the EU. So he was pro-EU. So he really strongly believed that Italy have to stay with the EU, right? EU side, right? But however, the right-wing parties have a different view. They have, for example, about immigration or the war, Ukraine. They have a different view of the right wing, right? So it's more like anti-immigrations, anti-refugee issues. There's a really big issue in EU side. Also, not only the EU, I think that's to the international community. And it depends on really who's going to be next prime minister. There was a big challenge to not only to the EU and the international community, how they handle the situation. So as we know that the pandemic situation, is getting better, but still we have some of the Omicron situation, other the variants also happening, not only in Europe and in Korea, in Asia and other Asian countries. And then that's the things that how they will wait and see what happened, and then see that in Italian politics, right?
Well, Mr. Draghi's presence will certainly be missed in Brussels, not least for his very seasoned navigation of the Europe's economic affairs. And well, he was, of course, credited for saving the Eurozone when he was the president of the European Central Bank. And well, what does his departure really have? What kind of implications will his departure have for Brussels?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned earlier, right? So basically, I guess that Italy is a big player in the EU, right? And they need to good support whatever they do, right? So during his term, Draghi's term, right? There was his cabinet was very friendly and were willing to work with the EU, many different issues, right? Especially like Ukraine war, and they do handle the situation with the EU very effectively with other leaders at the European countries as well. So and also as a European Central Bank president, he did a lot of had a very very strong professional achievement and how to deal with the euro situations, and I think that's really got pretty good credentials and how to deal with the situation. The problem was the Draghi situations that he was the technocrat, so it's not really the really the politician. It's not a career politician. So what happened was that he didn't have a really strong political backup. So it's a problem. So, but considering his popularity, as the prime minister, I think it's I'm kind of concerned. I'm really worried about what happened in the next, the government in Italy, because that he was very strong support from and really one of the highest, support rate, approval rate, actually, throughout the recent history of the Italian politics. So I think it's a great loss for the Italian government, also the people, and during the crisis. Not only now. The pandemic crisis is kind of, we're about to getting over to the pandemic crisis. Now we have a new energy crisis starting from the Ukraine war, right? The Ukraine crisis, right?
So I think that's a huge loss for not only the Italian people in terms of dealing with their economy, but the rest of Europe as well, because he was seen as a key policymaker really behind devising the sanctions against Russia as well. And they definitely would need him in Brussels to deal with this pan-European inflation and the cost of living crisis that they're facing. So it couldn't have come at a worse time really for Europe. And well, the big worry, though, is this growing Euroscepticism. Do you see European politics continuing to move to the right, or do you think we will just continue to see this kind of trajectory in the rest of Europe?
Yeah, I afraid so, because what happened was that think of same thing happening in Korea and many countries, right? During the pandemic crisis, right? So people try to get support their leaders, right? Because there's big crisis, and it's not a political issue; it's the pandemic situation. But now many people, whatever is true, but they're kind of recovering from the pandemic crisis, so that they now their focus now move to the economic issues. Is the economy better? But what happened was in most countries, including the Korea and other countries, right? Happened was that during the pandemic situation, well, especially in EU, they have to they have shut down all the businesses, for many times. So there was the economics got went really bad. So now they have to stimulate their economic situation. That's how the things happen, right? So now that they concern about the focus changing from the pandemic to the economic, right, economic situation. So that's things that people more focus on the borders. We're concerning about how can we effectively improve the economic situation. But however, the thing about the situation in Italy, right? What Draghi is a former banker and economist who will do best. I think that from based on his credentials, right? He might be the best candidate for the country like Italy to dealing with many economic crises also, right? So I'm very concerned about what happens in Italy because there is great loss to the Italian and not only to Italy and the EU, right? Things.
Right, and in the greater realm of international politics, the question of working with the US and the NATO solidarity, where do you think Italy is really headed? Should it go with should citizens pick a right-wing party or a coalition of right-wing parties, rather?
Well, it's a tough question, right? Because we can't tell we can't say what happened in Italy, right? In the election, right? In September election, so we have a snap election, which is actually the first time actually they have an election in the September, right, fall, right? So what happened was that the big change happening in Italian politics as well. So we'll have to wait and see what happened. But it's most likely what happened was that the right-wing party one of the right-wing will be controlling both houses in Italy. The parliament, right? So whatever was, we have to see how they handle the situation. So, but however, as we anchor said, right, we're saying that my concern is that maybe it's not only the Italian problem, right? Italian government problem. Maybe some, UK also having the very similar happens, and many European countries and growing number of European countries facing very similar situation that people more concerned about economics, development. Now they want to focus on the more politics, politics rather than the pandemic situation. So it's more like they become more politics, and they will see looking at their national interest rather than the international interest. So things happens. So we'll have to I hope that the leaders and the people in Europe want to make the right choices in terms of the improving international cooperations, not only for the pandemic situation, also the war in Ukraine, right?
Right, thank you very much for your time today. Dr. Jun-seong, Visiting Professor of Yonsei University's Graduate School of International Studies.
Thank you.